Any questions on that before we get started?
So the first, just to be a little dense, right? There's two functions that are required when you do this, right? One is the variable, and then you provide the gestures, and that's the first function. And the second function is what is referred to in the first function, and it's the second function that goes up in the unit load. Did I get that right?
So we're talking about gestures now, or talking about switching programmatically?
Well, the kind of stuff we were doing the other day.
Yeah. So let me refer to this. Did everyone pull up this cheat sheet?
Yeah.
Right. So we'll be using this today as well, especially as we go into table views. We're going to refer to this. We're going to copy paste from this. So going back to your question, Mary, your question was.
I'm just trying to understand. First blob does this, second blob does this at a high level, right? Because that's helpful to me in terms of breaking it down. Yeah. And then first blob does this, second blob does this, and the blob that you call from the view did load is number 1 or number 2.
So the first one is creating your property with your instance of your class, UI swipe gesture controller. You pass in selector, so an action. So that's the function that will handle the swipe event. Then you set direction, and then you add it onto a UI view or a label or a button or a view, and you add that swipe gesture. That's the first step. You can put this in either view.load, or you can put this in a separate function that is like set up swipe gesture, like prepare swipe. And then call this function in view.load. And then the second thing to do is handle what happens on the view, and that's going to be your did swipe function. That function will require a UI swipe gesture recognizer coming in, and in there you can do whatever you want to happen on this swipe.
You need the word selector with that question?
You don't.
You don't. No, you don't. You should just be able to pass like that.
What they sprint
Losing friends. Yeah.
Any more questions on gestures and switching views programmatically?
So when you create a view controller programmatically, I could theoretically get the same code, right, in multiple view controller and create it programmatically. Could I do that? Let's say I have a first view controller, second view controller, and I put the exact same code. I don't know, it's just theoretical, right? For whatever reason, I want to reach the third view controller from either or.
Sure.
So could I do that?
Well, you can create the actual interface for it programmatically, but if it's its own separate scene that has its own separate logic, it still needs a controller file. It still needs like a view controller to Swift file.
Understood, but so for example, I can have a button on two view controllers that actually call the exact same view controller.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So you have 3 view controllers.
Yes.
And there's a button on each one, and then each one of them leads to a separate view controller. Yeah. Yes. Cool. So gestures are not really going to be a requirement from this point on, but it's good to understand them and to implement them in our applications because they are part of the ecosystem. Users do expect them. But we're not going to be worrying about them too much. In your final projects and midterms, you can choose to implement them. In your projects, as we hand out projects, you can choose to implement them. We might suggest in some situations. So gestures will not be a requirement from this point on. They're just a good tool to have in our repository because we have that option. Now, switching views programmatically, we're going to start using all the time. So that will be something that's going to be required from this point on, especially today and next class. Today we're going to focus on arrays and table views. We're going to use arrays to populate our table views. We're going to learn how to remove items from our table views. And finally, we're going to learn what design patterns are. And delegation is a design pattern, a very heavily used design pattern in iOS that lets us pass information around our view controllers, right? Because right now, our view controllers are totally unaware of each other, right? We can now go from view controller to view controller, but if I have an add new view controller and I add something, it can pass information back to my main view controller. So this is a very, very important pattern called delegation. And I know a lot of you had questions on protocols. You understand on a high level how they work, right? Can someone remind me how protocols work?
They're more or less classes, the way you declare them, the way you write them. However, you don't need to assign values to the variables. Yeah, the variables basically inside. And they have a bunch of variables and a bunch of functions, or you want to call them methods, that you will use later on with your classes or objects.
Yeah, so they can use in our classes, right?
Yeah. So, and if you have a subclass that's inheriting, you first have to write the name of the superclass that's inheriting from, then the protocols.
So protocols essentially just set rules for our classes, right? They set expectations. So this is very important. We're going to review protocols in a bit more detail when we run this delegation. But delegation essentially makes these protocols. It sets expectations for our view controllers, so we can pass information back and forth based on those expectations. So delegation is going to be very, very important. We're going to be using it from this point on in all of our projects. Real world, I use delegation on every single project I work on. How about you?
Yeah. There's no way to mic an app without it.
Yeah.
Did you already go?
No, that's what we're doing today.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, you missed that.
Not too bad. Yeah. Just for the first time.
Yeah, there's no recording, there's no handouts. By the way, guys, there's some handouts. Does anyone have the handouts for delegation? Please, pass them around. Yeah. Yes.
Delegation might seem very intimidating,
That's too much.
but like just try to listen and pay close attention and soak it in, and in the end we can look back at what happened.
Yeah, and so in arrays, we're going to go pretty deep in. It's important for us to understand everything that's going on with arrays. Table views, populating our table views, there's a lot of things we pass on there, but we can sit here and dissect table views for a whole week. So what the approach I want to take for table views is understand the syntax, understand the functions we need for table views, and the information we put on there, and not necessarily dissect everything right away. That's going to come later. Yeah.
Jog my memory a little bit. We got table views and we got table view controllers as well, right?
Yep.
We've not touched on them. Okay.
Not really. No. Like we've directly dropped
When we
Yeah.
first did the controllers, when we were just working with storyboards, we never did anything with the table view controller.
Yeah, we haven't really done any details, so we'll do it today.
Alright.
Cool, so let's start with arrays. So arrays are essentially lists of information. They're a list of strings, they're a list of integers, they're a list of doubles, list of floats. The way to think about arrays is kind of like notebooks, right, or even books, in that they're ordered. So you have a page 1 and you have a page infinity, and each page holds certain information. And the way that we access information is by calling the page number. And the main way we add information to our pages is by either editing at the very end or going to a specific page and writing on that page, so overriding the page. Right, so we say, go to page 5, and we're going to override page 5 with this string. Go to page 20, if it, then write something on page 20. We can reverse books, so we can start from the back of a book and see how we can pull information from the back of a book. We have methods for arrays where we can pull the first page, we can pull the last page, and we can also iterate pages, right? You guys remember we've done loops. So we can loop through an array, through a list of things. And it works exactly like the loops we've done through numbers. Remember we did for index in 1 through 5? We do exactly the same thing in arrays. We do for index in array, and it goes through each and every single item in the array, and we can either present information or do something with information. One thing to note with arrays is, unlike books, they don't start at page 1, they start at page 0. So the very first element in arrays is 0. So when you do, there's a method in arrays called count, so you can get the length of the notebook, for example. But just because we have 25 pages doesn't mean that we can access the 25th page by saying 25. The 25th page is really 24, right? Because we start at 0. So that's the tricky part to remember about arrays.
What was the last part? What tricky part?
So we can get the number of pages in a notebook, right, an array. So if our total count is 25, the 25th element is not 25, it's 24, because our index has 0. And looking up arrays is very, very fast. It is super fast to store data in arrays and pull information from arrays. Okay?
So is the count, when you declare an array and you fill the elements, does the language automatically assign a count to that?
Yeah, so it's a method that we get from arrays. Arrays by default, I don't want to get too low level, they inherit from structs. So they're kind of struct. And they give us, the struct is a method called count. There's a method of, get this, if it's empty, it's empty. There's a bunch of continuous methods we get from arrays.
So count gives me the number of elements in an array. Not that it's relevant to this, but kind of reminds me. If I have a string and I want to know the number of characters in it, is that dot length? Is that how I get the number of characters in the string?
It is count something. It's not the length. It's count something. I don't remember.
Characters or something? That's their characters, not.
Count elements.
Count elements.
Count
Right?
count.
Yes, count elements. And it's not dot count elements. It's a method that takes the string. So let's go into playgrounds and start experimenting a little bit. And again, your reference sheet for this, remember to pull your playgrounds. That's where a lot of the methods that we're using are on. And for the purpose of the class, the goal is to start by putting together an array of to-do lists, to-do items. And throughout the whole class, we're going to put that in a list and be able to populate our table with array items, remove items from our to-do list, and then hopefully, if we have time, but in a class, add a new item through a new view through delegation. So that's the goal of the whole class, is to build a to-do app. But for now, let's create a playground. Oop. So I'm gonna call this arrays. Cool. Everybody have this? So arrays, just like integers and strings, they're a certain type. So for us to define a string or an integer, we have to assign it to a variable or constant, right? Exactly the same thing with arrays. We can define a variable and call it my array. And I'll say 1, 4, 10, 15, 20. So what's going on here? We're just in a variable name, right? So we haven't given it a type. So our type is being what? Inferred. So this is an array of integers.
So it's double inferring. It's inferring that it's an array, and it's also inferring that it's of what the content type is.
I see how you say that, but technically no, because it's an array of integers and it's a type of its own. They're all different types. So an array of strings is a type.
So you can't mix an array of strings and integers.
You can, but we're not gonna go through today.
Okay.
For today, we're gonna stick to the same types:
Okay.
array of strings, array of integers, array of doubles, and so on. Yeah.
I think what she meant to say was that because you put a square bracket on it, it knows that it's an array.
Yeah. Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
It's all inferred and zero.
Yeah. So with brackets, arrays are associated with brackets.
Right.
So another way we can create an array is we can tell it the kind of array we want. And there's two things going on here. We're being explicit in our array declaration. We're saying we want an array of integers, right? And over here is we're saying we have an empty array. So the only way for us to create an empty array is by being explicit in the type of array that we want. So we can't just say my second array equals empty array. And I'll show you why in a second. It's not yelling at us now, but it'll yell at us later.
When I create an array, like here you could, it's an array of integers, but I could also have an array of CGRs, right? Like a specific type of object.
Yep.
So I say again, so we're declaring that the array is array of integers, and then the empty brackets mean.
It's an empty array. And the only way we can start an empty array is by being explicit in when we define it. So to say it's an array of integers. We can't just say my second array is an empty array. We have to set the expectation of an empty array of integers.
It's just like when we declare a variable anywhere else, if we're not going to set it, if it can't be type inferred by what we're setting it equal to, then we have to tell it what it is.
Question so far? So there's two ways of defining an array. So if I was to define an array of strings, how would I do that? An empty array of strings.
Colon string.
Colon string or colon
Bracket string.
bracket string, right? At this point, this is cake for you guys, right? For classes and functions. A refreshing piece of cake.
So this is it, right? Bio break. Do that.
Cool. So we'll stick here. Yep.
So new rules with optionals apply right now. We're declaring a string. Could be an optional string or
Within the array or of the array itself?
within the
So with arrays, it's not non-existent. It has to exist because the binary has to exist. It's the things inside of it that exist or not. So for now, we'll just stick to no options. We'll stick to if it's an empty array, it's like that. We'll move into that in a couple classes to get more comfortable. So for me to access the third element in my array, what number is this? 2. So the way I access that is my array and then a number 2. Remember I told you about the convenience methods? I can also say my array dot first. And my array dot last.
What does it say sum?
What does it say sum?
well, that actually happens when it's an optional.
It is an optional, right?
Except it's because you're not specifying which.
That's because it's returning an optional, right? So if we click into this first method, we see that it returns an optional.
Because for example, the second array where we didn't put anything in it, if we were to do second array first.
Exactly. So if I do second array at last, what's that going to return? No. Right?
So note how it only got a set when we make it to the first method. That's how we use protocols as well. We always set it to get a set, but like right here you couldn't do my array on first equals set.
Yeah. So remember, protocols is a good point. Remember in protocols when we do the get and set properties, right? So this only has a get. So if I want to add something to the end of my array, this is the most inexpensive way to add something to our arrays. I can do, let's add something to our second array, dot append. And in parentheses, I can append something. So I'll say 20. So now, if I do second array, we have one element in there. And we'll call the things that reside inside arrays, we'll call those elements. Questions so far?
Append always adds it to the end of that specific perspective.
Yep. So I'm gonna
In terms of best practices, is it better to do append or do like plus equals and then whatever the next array value is in practice?
I usually do append. There's no best practice behind that, just be consistent. As far as how expensive of a method is, it's not much difference. Yep.
What is the rationale for using parentheses to append or brackets to establish? Why don't they just consistent?
And is a function.
Because that's a method, right?
That's a good one.
Yeah. So all of these are methods. Well, actually, this is a property, so it's a method.
But plus equals is not a method. That's fine.
No. Yep. So we know how to add an element to the very end of our array, but what if I want to add something in the middle? What if I want to add something in the third element of my array?
Insert as index.
Yep. So the way we go about that is I'll go with my first one. I'll do my array dot insert, and the first parameter that goes in there is the thing that I want to insert. So let's say 100, and then we have to tell it where to insert it. So 2. Right, so now our new array is 1, 4, 100.
And this will automatically shift everything else behind it.
Because now 100 is our third element, or second, right? Everything else gets shifted 1.
Just to, I don't know why if I wanted to insert an element in the position or at the index for the last, right?
Before the last?
For the last element.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many elements there are. Can I add index right after the colon or double colon or so, whatever you call that? Can I have my array dot count
100%.
negative 1?
Yeah. So let me take a step back and I'll answer that. So for us to get the size of the array, remember is the dot count, right? So that returns the length of the array, right? So Ali's question was, if I don't know how big our arrays are, because in real world situations, our arrays might have 1,000 elements, right? How do I know if our arrays are constantly growing, if the user is constantly interacting, removing, adding elements, how do I know how large my array is? How do I know what the next to the last element is, right? So we know the whole size of the array by array.count. So I can do my array dot insert, let's say 50, then at index. So how do I get the next to last?
My array dot count negative 1. There must be some sort of typecast minus 1. You don't have to put my array in that count.
Nope. Now, is it -1 or is it -2?
It should be -2, right? Because -1 is going to be, so
0.
25, for example. But if you want to the last item is gonna be 24. So it should be
Actually, -1 is right. -1 is right.
You're
Yeah.
still on that. It's relative to.
It's relative, yeah,
It's
when you put it
relative
in
to
there.
the last.
Yeah, it's relative to the last.
It's not
Yeah,
absolute.
exactly.
Wait, I'm not following, because here, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 elements. So my array count would be what? Oh, it says 6.
Right? Because our size is 6, and then 6 minus 1 is 5, and before we insert it in there, it was still 6. So inserted the fifth one, now it's 7.
Okay.
So it bumps the fifth.
Yep.
It doesn't go after the fifth. It becomes the fifth.
It becomes the fifth. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So that's not -1.
So that's how you'd add it, that's how you make a new element, the default last element, so you +1.
The default element? No, you just go to append. Append ends at the very end.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. There's also some other convenience methods that are really helpful. You can do myArray.isEmpty. Tells us if it's empty or not. So this one is false, right? If I do second array, or let's do string array, that is empty, is false or true. Questions so far? It's pretty easy, right? After functions and classes and delegates and protocols and
Wait, we haven't done those.
that's a joke.
Don't scare me, don't do that.
So there's one more thing I want to go over arrays. Now we can figure out other methods for arrays. There's quite a few other ones. If you click on one of the methods, you can look at other respective ones. So we have remove at index, just like, actually that's a really good one to remember. So if I do my array remove at index, I can say I want to remove the 100, so the third element. So now we no longer have, oh sorry, second element. Remove the 100.
What if I wanted to replace a certain element? I just declare like my array 2 in square brackets, and then I attribute the new value, right?
Yeah, so to replace something, if I want to replace the 4, I do my array 1 equals 40. So now my array is 140, 100. So to remove is remove at index. My array dot remove at index. Again, you guys can find out all these functions by just clicking on one of them and just browsing through the properties and methods that it provides us.
I think it's because we deleted remove at index and then you one
Also, Apple developer tools on the internet, there's more pages, like go into depth how to use it and what is expected. And just make it a little bit more structured than the source code.
Honestly, for stuff like this, I find the source code a lot more helpful.
I always use it. I mean, yeah.
Depends. If it's something like protocols or delegates, like a big subject, then the developer documentation is awesome. For like convenience methods like this, it's super easy. Just click into the methods that are associated with it. Questions so far?
As if you know what the method is.
And for the last one, my array got remove at index 2.
Yep.
So I did that and it worked fine. Then I replaced the 2 with my array dot count. I got a really horrible error. Why would it work for the other one?
Sorry, you replaced the what?
I replaced the integer 2 with my array dot count. Because I wanted to remove the last number of the array.
It's my count minus 1, right? Because the count is, say you have 10 elements in an array, count gives you 10, but the last item is 9. Yeah.
So how do you join two arrays?
With a plus sign. With a plus sign. I don't want to spend too much time on joining now, but with a plus sign is how we join arrays. So one more subject I want to cover in arrays, because I think now we're self-sufficient in looking at jumping to documentation for the other methods. These are really the important ones. Looping through arrays, being able to go through each element in the array and doing logic. So if I want to go through all of my numbers, I can do for I in my array. Let's start with just print line for now. And again, remember that I can be anything. It's a temporary variable, right? It could be temp, could be index, could be array, value, whatever. Right, so we have 6 elements, so we ran 6 times. And if I look at our console, we see that it went through all of our numbers.
So here we don't need to put what is it, typecast or I. We don't need to put I like with a backslash and
No, because we're not mixing it with a string. We're just printing out the integer. If we are mixing with a string, then we have to
if we
typecast.
wanted to say the value at array position blah 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 is then we'll need to
Exactly. So when we check arrays, when we loop through arrays, we can also do logic, right? So we can do something like if I equals 100, print line, and go. Else. So if we look at our source code, when we go to 100, oh, we didn't have 100 because we removed it over here. So let's do this again. Oh, right here, bingo. So looping through arrays works exactly the same as looping through our 1 to 5, 1 to x. And we can do operations to check what the current value of the item in the array is and run operations of that. Any questions on this? Okay, so let's do a quick practice. We'll start with do list app right now, and we'll do 3. We break into 3 different times to work on this. So for the first exercise, we'll create a new method project called to do app, and in the first view controller class that we're given, define a new array, and in our view load function, append an item to the array. So these are all to do items, right? To do lists. So add a whole bunch of to do tasks. And then after you add the new item, append through each one of the items and print it in the console. And then as a bonus, if you want to add a text box in your C to append something to an array, you can do that. We'll reuse that code later.
doing that right now.
Go.
Time starts now. You mean project, not playground.
New project, yeah. Makes it a project because we're going to build on it throughout the rest of the class.
So the items need to be strings.
Yep.
Send the link comes back with a doodle for the 94% iOS workshop, so fill that out like somewhere in the next days.
Yeah, what is it, dude? You were saying that earlier, I was like,
I've never seen a doodle
It
before.
wasn't me.
I
I
think
do
it
it
was
all the
genius
time, but.
It's like a time, really like time scheduler kind of thing.
Oh, you mean like my app? I want to tell you when everyone can do it.
Goodness, too many things.
Yeah, you don't have to go ahead and start, guys.
Yeah.
So when I do what I do is I here becomes the object itself. Okay. Because I was thinking, when I say the object I is
Yeah, you can do that, right? You would start a string first, and you would be like,
so first I start with string
Yeah,
at 0, and then I get here.
you can just do this, right? The object next I is, and then you have to do this, and then you can do I.
Are you okay? Whatever. Because I thought the I, so the I is just string.
The index number is the number in the array at that point.
So it's not going to be the actual object.
It has to be straight.
Because I thought once they I do, this is the actual object.
That's what you want, no?
Yes, but if I wanted to find the actual position within the array, so
That's I. I is the position. So this will, yeah, this will start at 0, and we'll go bullet pointers to something in the array more.
Okay.
Otherwise,
Well, let's get rid of that.
I actually already.
See, look, it doesn't pass the actual number. It passes the function. It passes the string.
He wants to
So
add-
I would do it like this then.
Append is for a blank. It's for a blank.
or I. So let's try size.
Listen to Lisa's.
Yeah. And I plus.
Yeah. And then that's where I do to-do list.
Insert like a specific number into the array to the
So
position.
more I
That's okay.
Yeah, now you can do this.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I got it.
Automatically adds the
Got it. Yes,
list.
that makes sense.
What is it? Yeah, just. Oh yeah, yeah, the alcohol thing, yeah, it's pretty huge. I'm not involved. Luckily, I wouldn't want to do it, but it's like it's more social stuff, like social media, like keeping their page up to date, and like. So, wait, this, I some long-term experience with it. Seems to be everything that it's talking about. So, first I would say, stay over here, like, this always has to be to the top right. And this has to be a little bit. And do this. So, right now, you're seeing everything. The next thing I do is, this always be turning this to the top. I'm not going to worry about this. This is the space right now between those two, yeah. Then I'm gonna set the width fix of this. I'm gonna try not to get a seal habits, so this is not corrected. It shows it with the first and next one. See if I do
How are we doing? Are we almost there?
At the point, so yes.
Okay, let's do one more minute and we'll call a stop because there's a lot of content to cover. If you were at the bonus, it's okay.
and always sense if you want to only something or one. Not just for
All right. Let's break and jump to the next subject because it's very important for us to implement this for table views. Any questions or raised before we move on? So how do I add something to the end of an array? And how do I access my second element in the array?
Number one.
Number one. So array name and number one, right? And what to remember is we only work with variables in the examples. You can also have constants, and you cannot add or modify array elements to constant arrays. Just like variables, just like string integers, you cannot modify constants, right?
So you would use like constant array for like this US states, does that never change?
Exactly. So table views, arrays tie in directly to table views. So table views are essentially, if you go to your reminders app, our list, right? Or better yet, if you go into our settings app, sorry, I have a projector, into the settings app, we have a list of things, right? And there's sections. Yep. So basically, table views, they take in arrays, and they display them either through sections or just through one long section. For the purpose of this class, we're going to work with one section, but you can break things up. And there's a bit of vocabulary to remember about table views. So there's sections we just went over, which are grouped sections in our table views. There's rows. Rows are essentially, every section is a number of rows, so they're the different sections that go, the different rows that go in the section. Index path is the number of each cell or each row. Just like we have a number for each array item, there's a number for each cell. That's essentially how table views are mapped up with arrays. So if I was to have an array of, let's go GA campuses, and I'll do DC, New York, LA, the table view has an index path, which is 0, 1, 2, and we can tie the index path of each table view to each array item. So their table views are built, structured to work with arrays very, very close together.
So each element of an array is a table.
It's a cell with a table view, right? So if you have a table view that's like so, right? So the first item is DC, second item is New York, third item is LA. So each one of these is a cell.
So a table view per se is an array.
A table view, it's not an array, but it takes an array for the data.
Are table views always linear? Like, I mean, I just think about iPhone notes for a second, like to-dos, settings, they're always linear?
Yep.
The collection views if you want to make good stuff.
Yeah.
Complicated stuff.
And I was wondering if they count down or across, or if there's arrays within arrays. So in the settings app, when you open up something like usage, you get sub-arrays, basically. You get sub-tables. I mean, so it's just a different table with a different array, but it all.
Under usage is a table with different sections.
Yeah.
Now, there's a few requirements we need for tables to work. Those requirements are, we need to know the size of the table. So in arrays, how do we get the size of something? Of an array? Count, right? So that's the count. We need to give it number of sections. So for this one, for our purposes class, it will always be one. We'll work with one section. And then optionally, we also need to give it the we have the thing that goes in the array. So the item, array element, then it goes in the table. Now, after we do delegates, I want us to go back into tables because the way tables work are through delegates. And basically, the way that works is we have a whole bunch of functions that we drop into our controllers. And whenever we build a table, we're required to fill the information within those functions. So the required ones are the count, that's a method. Sections, that's a method. And then we also have a method that gives us for populating our table.
Would that be a protocol that you need? Sorry.
Yes. There you go.
Sounds good.
So it's exactly it. So our table views are run off protocols, and the pattern for that is called delegate, because there's something else that goes on behind the scenes that fires those methods when we need them. But I don't want us to worry about it for now.
So the things that are required are the count and size.
And sections.
So count and section.
Yeah.
So count is what, the number of cells that we want.
Exactly. So say these are functions. This is a pub quiz. We're going to go over this in a second. And I have a function for, and there's one confusing part. The functions actually all start with table view. They just have different parameters. So I have my first function, which is the size of the table view. So if I had an array of GA campuses over there, what would I return? I would return GA campuses. Yep. Dot count.
That would be your count. And then the section is
Just do one.
arbitrarily.
So, sorry, I still think it's sections is that specific cell.
No. Sections is if you go into your settings.
Or your contacts app, how like the T and then the STU, like the lines in between, that's third time section. And that's, both settings and contacts or both table views, they look a little bit different. So that's because you have two styles, so it's like very easy to switch from one to the other.
Exactly.
Like in our contacts, our A will be a section, our B will be a section.
And what is the relationship between sections and cells?
Each section has many cells, right?
Your
So-
table have a little.
Exactly. So in my settings, if I have the top section is airplane mode is a cell, Wi-Fi is a cell, Bluetooth is a cell. So
So stupid question, or maybe off topic, but things like Twitter and Instagram, are they table views as well? Is that,
I haven't used the actual Twitter client in a while. I need to go back and
I
check.
think
use that
Twitter,
I think Twitter is, yeah.
it's
Instagram might
almost
be
like
as
this,
well.
it's almost like a subview when you go, it's almost like a subsection when you go
You'll
into
be-
an actual series.
you'll be shocked how many table views you see now. You know what it is. Every app like Spotify, your music
Every
is
app has
table views.
yeah.
Everything's table views.
So this is super important. One more analogy I want to make, going back to arrays. What's our method for removing an item in an array? Remove at index, right?
Yep.
So we also have a method that table views give us, which is to remove elements. And again, the way we approach that is we remove at index and we give it the index of the array we're going to remove that. So when we go into code right now, I want to show you how to implement these, but I do not want to dissect everything because we'll be here for days. Again, I want us to know what those methods are and what the important information we return are, which is really only 3 or 4 pieces of information. Questions before we move? Let's also refer to our cheat sheet. Open this so you can copy paste from here. So let's create a new project and also keep your to-do app open because you're gonna do an exercise after our demonstration to add your to-do list into a table view.
So you don't want to see
No, we're gonna use a totally different project that you're gonna use as a reference later. So let's create a new project. And I want to call this table demo, table view demo. Let's go in our storyboard. So let me know when everybody has this. I'm sorry? Okay, so in our storyboard, let's drag a table view controller. So table view controller, you can filter it. We dragged it just like a normal view controller.
And you want to have a table view controller where basically you want your entire view to be that table.
Yep.
As opposed to the table view element.
Yeah.
Is if you wanted to have, let's say, split view.
Yeah, that's going to require a bit better knowledge of us, of delegation, before we go into the specific table view, so we'll do it next class. So Alex's question was, if we search for table, it's a very good question. You'd see that we have a table view controller and a table view. Table view requires a bit more configuration from our part. So for now, we'll just stick a table view controller until we get past delegation. Because table view requires delegation. It requires us to manually implement protocols. So everybody have this? Let's also add a new file, a new controller. Now, so far we've been adding UI view controllers. This time, we'll do a table view controller, UI table view controller. So
Cover touch still?
Coco Touch, yep, and then the subclass is UI table view controller.
We keep the name table view.
I'm just gonna leave this table view controller for now. We're only gonna have one for now. And then let's also make sure that our scene is tied with the class as well. That's exactly the same flow as a normal UI view controller. So you select the table view controller, and then you go into your identity inspector and select the class that we added, which is table view controller. Make sure it's table view controller and not UI table view controller, because table view controller is what we added. So table view controller is this thing right here that we added.
So we choose as table view.
Yeah, that's the one. When you edit the file over here, this should also be called table view controller. That's the one we're referencing.
Yes.
It really doesn't have much that table view controller in.
Not yet.
So is it because it's a UI table view controller object, and then there's a bunch of stuff that happens in the background that take care of everything that if we were to draw a table view, we have to do that manually.
You have to do all the manual, yeah.
So it's all done in the background.
It's all done in the background, yeah. It's all events, and those methods get fired whenever we tie it to our view controller. We'll go over that in a little bit. So everyone tied our table view to our table view class. Let's also make sure that our starting screen is our table view controller. So drag and drop the arrow to our table view controller. Let's see if it runs.
So what point is the view controller?
We're not doing anything with it yet. We might come back to it later. So we should see an empty table. right? Exactly.
Stupid question.
No such thing.
But if you, instead of doing the dragging the arrow over, you could programmatically do that by putting this at the you did load, right?
Not if you did load. You can do that, and you can select your
Order and stuff.
element, and then in your first icon here, you can click on.
It's fine, don't worry about it. I just thought.
Yeah, you can select it from here. Cool. So everybody have this, and it's running. So I want to jump into my table view controller Swift file real quick. We're not going to touch our actual interface builder scene for a while, and we see that instead of inheriting from UI view controller, we're now inheriting from UI table view controller, right? And they also added a whole bunch of convenience methods here for us.
Say that again, that last bit.
Instead of inheriting from UI view controller, so if you click on view controller, you see the inheritance here is UI view controller. The inheritance for table view controller is UI table view controller.
What's the superclass of all of these view controllers? Is there one superclass for all of them?
All of these view controllers inherit from UI view controller, but it also inherits from UI view, and it goes up the chain. If you're very curious, keep command clicking.
Just the one above that, that's all.
See if you can go all the way to the middle of the inception.
I'm like, I have a 7-second memory span, that's it.
It's okay. Okay, so we see there's a whole bunch of methods added here for us. I'm also going to close my sidebars here so you could have this whole view. So we can go ahead and remove this, the receive memory warning. Don't need this yet. I'm also going to remove these comments. I can open up some space here.
Once you remove, we comment it out and just delete it.
I just removed it.
Oh, come on.
Mark.
Mark is great. If you click on this guy over here, you can type some marks yourself, and it will give you an outline of your methods structured. It will say table view data source. If you write some custom delegates, I always mark them so I can quickly jump. And the little line here, the dash, means
I thought it was your person name.
no, it's great.
It's really, I use it all the time. Yeah. Mark is very useful. Mark is the man. Okay, so there's a few methods here that we're given that are very important. So, number of sections, remember that ties into the sections over there. So for our case, we're going to return 1. And then for number of rows in section, this is where we return what?
The count of the array.
The count of the array. So I'm going to create an array here, and we'll call this GA campuses. I'm going to do it at the very top. So I'll say var GA campuses. I'll do Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles,
Atlanta.
Tong, Atlanta, and we can leave it there for now.
Great. Yeah.
I also want to Mandarin side by side.
So what do I change? This is number of sections, right? What do I change number of sections to?
Return 1.
1. We return 1. That's a requirement. We have to have number of sections. So if you have 0, it won't display anything. We need to have 1.
Okay. So if we had like this array and then we had another array that said like what country that we're in, that would be a return section.
Depends how you set it up.
Or anything.
Sure.
Commands, all cases, of course, good.
Now, one thing that's confusing is you'll see this table view method, defined a few times, but it does different things based on these parameters. So in this case, the parameter is number of rows. So if I want to figure out number of rows in my table, what do I do?
GA count.
Yes.
Should we count or count that as one?
Dot count. So GA campuses. Wait, GA campuses or self dot GA campuses? They actually both work. Just remember, for now, good practice. Let's stick to self for everything.
So right now you would still have.
Oh, yeah.
You what?
You would still have an empty table.
Yeah. Why do we still have an empty table? Actually, let's run this and see what happens.
Should be six cells.
Yeah. So we should have 6 cells, but those cells don't have anything, right? Or how many cells do we have in there?
Nine front.
Uh-oh.
Terminating with the uncut exception of type 10 is exception.
Uh-oh. Okay, that's okay. Let's cancel out. We'll just add the rows before we run again. That was my bad. Okay. So now is where we return, where we actually enter the data for our table view. Now, when I did this at home yesterday, it gave me an error. I think the code, the Xcode, is giving us out of the box might be buggy. Let's try it again. If it doesn't work, we can copy paste from the playground I provided to you guys. But let's try this regardless. And this is one I'll have to actually explain a little bit. So this third method, we have to uncomment out.
Yes.
Override functions.
Yeah. So everybody should have these 2 methods provided to them. We return one for the first one for number of sections. Campus is the count for number of rows. And now we uncomment the third method, the third function. And this is where we configure each cell, or we enter each cell. And the way this works is, we'll go in much more detail in the next class or 2. But basically, think of it as a loop, and basically goes through each cell, and we populate it with the array index number.
So the first pass kind of to like figure out where things can go before we put it in.
Yeah. So basically, now we know we have, let's say, 4 cells, right? And we know I have, or 3 cells. So first time we go to this cell, and we populate the first cell, and we give it the index value. And the index value is provided for us. So as it counts through each of these cells, the first time it counts, it gives us a 0, it gives us a 1, it gives us a 2. And then we match these numbers with our array values.
Okay.
So these numbers here is a convenience variable that we're given. And that variable is the index path and the row. So the way we do that,
So is that something that you would use to append it or add things to like easy reference which cell you want to put that in?
exactly. So we don't have to do the logic, give us logic for that. So we're already defining, it already gives us the cell definition over here, and we might have to override this in a second. So don't worry about copying what I do just yet. I want to see it run. We had this, like Xcode's convenience methods are crashing for me.
Add them.
Yeah, that's.
What does it do here? It would crash.
Yeah, it doesn't figure out the cell. The cell index path is totally off. We'll try it regardless. So I can access the cell. And then we give it a text label. So this cell, we actually have access to this whole cell over here. So we can change all its properties. We change the background color, we can change the text color. So any property that's available in the cell, we can change those. But for now, we'll just change the text. So the property is text label and then dot text. So if I want to access my array, I do self.ga_campuses.
Yeah, it's like-
Yeah, it should automatically have a question mark. And that's because it's an optional. And then how do I access a certain number in my array? Brackets? Access something? So the way I access the specific item in my array is I do index path. And you have the index path defined over here, right?
So an index path is just going to be that bunch of numbers 0, 1, 2. More or less.
Yep, exactly. And then the row of the index path. The row is where it's at now during the count. So as it goes to the first cell, it brings up number 1. So in my array, I get number 1. As it goes in the second cell, it gives me number 2. So I get number 2 for my array, and so on.
Why is it not 0, 1?
0, 1. It is exactly that. Yeah. And on fire, Sonia.
No, this is a complete one.
Okay, so son of a gun.
How do you do the clean thing again?
Product clean.
Product clean.
But it's never going to work for crashes when your application succeeded building. It's only for like when you have errors before building. So when you have like the
Don't go away.
exclamation marks, and yeah, that don't go away, that you are convinced of that are right.
So let's see what's going on here.
Oh, you have to register your cell in your storyboard too. No,
Oh, you might be right.
you do. You have to do a reuse item. I don't know if it's that, but
Yeah, we have to actually register. You're right.
no, there you have it on the right UI table.
No. I usually do this totally programmatically.
Yeah, me too. And it loads, right?
Yeah. No, hold on. Not segue.
That's not on now. That's not.
No.
This is one of them.
So that we don't load.
Here, let me try this. Let's go by the method I added in here, because I might add another step. Okay. There we go. Okay, so let's do this because there's another step we have to go through. I don't want to go through right now. If you go in the Xcode playground I provided, the first 3 methods are exactly the same as what we had in our table view controller. So copy paste the first 3 functions for number of sections. Huh?
108.
Yeah, 108 to 126. So number of sections in table view with number of rows, and then table view with the index path. So 108 to 126. I'm going to remove these comments.
Wants to copy 108 to 126.
Yep, and override those 3 methods we worked on.
We're overriding.
So number of sections, table view, and the second table.
Change yourself compared to your
I'm sorry, where do you paste them?
You paste them on the methods that we worked on.
So basically, we can uncomment those last three and paste these, right?
You can totally replace those. So these three methods we worked on,
Yeah.
I totally overrode those with the three I provided.
Lines there, what, 32?
Depends on how you spaced yours. I don't want to give you this. Yeah.
So override number of sections, override function number of sections in table,
Yeah.
override function table view.
Yeah.
And table view, override table view.
I'm sorry? Yeah, and instead of array, you guys are replacing self the GA campuses. So self the GA campuses account and self the GA campuses index path row. We'll come back to another method to do this next class or the class after. But for now, let's just stick to this method.
This part is what he wants to do.
Yes.
Correct?
I want us to get comfortable with the flow of these three methods before we go into more detail.
You don't need
So all three of these methods are required.
They are required. Yep. Actually, no. Two of them are required. The count and the sections. The one where we populate is not required, it's optional.
Oh, exactly. Well, that's why.
So it's not there.
Got it. Of course. Right.
Cool. So we now have our array in our table view.
Hey Teddy, can we have on the top line, if you want to put the Washington DC town, so you have a blank array?
If you want to what?
Have a blank array, like this.
What?
Washington, so you can push it down.
Yeah, don't do it like that.
You don't-
Yeah.
Like, this is not.
There's a better way to do that. Yeah, you don't want that. Yeah. We'll worry about styling stuff
To
later.
fix it, and now you could wrap in your storyboard, wrap it in navigation control, and then you would have a lot more.
Yeah, we'll do that next actually. Cool. So questions about these three methods. So remember, the three important ones for now are sections, which are now setting as one, count, which is our array count, and our index path of the array. So it's array number is index path of row. Questions on this so far?
Can you explain the last one over time again?
Yeah, so that's basically what we're doing here is we're doing the count, right? So by default, the count sets a number of cells in our table. And each one of these cells has an index number, it's an array. So 0, 1, 2. And what this is doing, the index path.
Can you actually walk us through the like pieces of it, just so I mean
These over here?
Okay. And don't because we're not going that level.
Let's
Okay.
go, that's a totally new rabbit hole.
Okay.
Just remember it's a requirement for now. After we do delegation, we're gonna get a bit more comfortable with that.
Okay.
I'll go over some of these properties now, but the way it's working, it's gonna take us a totally different path. So I just remember the requirements, which are sections, count, and index path. An index path is laying out a number of cells, and it's basically working like a loop. It's firing every time for each row in the table. So it's going to the first row on the table, and it's returning the row, index path row is the number of that cell. So
the text label.
so the text, the cell text label is setting the text for that row
From the array.
to be the number of the item in the array. So index path, that row is the cell number that we're at right now.
So
Index
that
path.
row correlates to what you did in the count, and how many rows.
Index path also comes with sections. So let's say we have Hong Kong under international and rest under United States. So the first time if international is the first time, your section would be 0. Hong Kong would be the first row, and then the second for let's say Washington DC, your section would be 1, and your row would be 0, and then 0, 2, 0, 3, and so on.
that would go
So-
under index path.
So index path dot section and then index path
Yeah,
dot
you have both of them.
Yeah.
And you can use both to like
But
set.
here, since we only have one section, we
Yeah, we
only
have
set up index path dot section.
We'll go over sections in the next couple classes. So any more questions on these three functions?
Just to further elaborate on that, what I'm doing with the index path dot row is basically each row is becoming an element in my array which represents a cell.
And the row is the number of that row. So we can reference the same number in that array.
Index path is a function that's already a method, right? That's already in there.
So, yeah. Cool. So let's go through one more function before we do our exercise. So right now we can't remove things from our array, right? And by default, if you go to mail, our remove action is a gesture to swipe. And we actually don't have to worry about the gesture because the table view takes care of that for us. So let's go in our, that method is also available down here, but I had some issues with the default one as well. So let's go back in our cheat sheet and grab this last method, which is commit editing style. Table view commit editing style. So this one right here. So it's 128 through 133.
Is that?
Yep. So let's paste this below our last function. And what do we change here? Yep. So what's the property we're changing? Self of my array. So we're doing self.ga campuses. All this is doing is we actually have different methods of editing. We can actually go into the cell itself. We can do a few things. Right now, we're just gonna work with delete. So we're checking if the user action is delete, which is just swipe to the left and then press delete. And then we're removing. Remember, remove at index. So remove at index an array number or array element number. That we have the index path row, which works exactly the same as the previous function, which is the row that we're swiping on is that index path row value. So this is super handy, super easy, right? We don't really have to, if we just follow these instructions, we can just refer to our array and remove its index by this this property that Xcode is giving us.
And in the background, does it actually remove the value from the array, or is it just removing the view?
Yeah, so if we don't have this on here, it just removes it from the view.
Okay.
Adding this GA to remove an index also removes it from our array. Because by default, it does not remove it from the array.
Except when you add GA campuses.
If you what?
If you say, because we have GA campuses, it will remove them from the array.
Yes, exactly.
We can specify.
So if I now swipe to the left, I get this delete. We have the remove functionality.
Because if when I basically killed the app, so if I swipe it up and then I start it again, I still have all the
Yeah, because our data isn't persisting right now yet.
Okay.
Right now, we're just starting with whatever we give it at the very top. Yeah. Allison, do you have a question?
Yeah, and there's no like database layer when you do mobile apps, right? So when you delete it, it takes it out of the array, and that's that.
Not yet. There's the database layer. There's a bit later. Yeah. It's a big beast. That's I predict problems with that. But that's weeks ahead.
I just was wondering.
Yeah.
If you didn't specify GA campuses and use by default, it doesn't remove it from the array, just remove it from the view. In the future, when you don't want to specify because you want to keep that information.
You always want to remove it. Because what's the point of removing something from your view if you never remove it from your data?
begin somewhere.
What if I want to call it back, if I want to bring it back again at some point, I just want this.
Then you archive it and store it somewhere else, then you remove it from your view.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, but so if you remove it now and you don't remove it, then you come back to this view again, it's gonna be back there. It's gonna be frustrating. So you want it to always remove it.
Maybe it's a feature.
Second feature. the drive me crazy feature.
There should not be an annoying feature.
The swipe gesture that shows the red delete button. I can't find it in the code.
It's because it's a convenience method we're getting.
I'm sorry.
It's a convenience method we're getting. You mean like the swipe gesture over here?
Yeah.
Yeah. That comes with a table view. It's a method that it gives us, convenience method.
Okay. And that's the and that's the dot delete.
Nope, that's the editing style, commit editing style. Delete is the action we're taking.
This is the action.
So if we delete, this happens.
Another editing style is like, for instance, that's what that is common. Like you can move rows in your table view so that you can check on that here too. That's why you have to check on. Right?
So I have to go into the file. We'll get back to that. One more thing to note here is we can also modify the way our cells look. So where would we set that property? Where are we defining our cells?
The cell dot something something.
Right, so cell is where we're defining our cells, right? Here we're setting our text property. So over here, I could do something like cell.background color equals UI color dot what? Blue. Want to complete? I don't know if it has yellow color. Next code is acting funky.
Yeah, I can get the yellow color.
We can also add conditional logic to here, so we can do something like if index path dot row is divisible by 2, we can change the background color blue, right? Huh?
Yeah, the next batch separated with the code on, so you have never.
Here,
Oh, my.
index.
Separate with what?
Period.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So let's run this. Pretty fugly, but it works.
I got behind and I just can't keep up with everything. So I thought
So this is where we can change all our properties for ourselves, conditionally based on our data and based on our place in the cells.
Yeah, your charts even includes your pictures. That's something.
All right, so why don't we go in our to-do list app and do the same thing we did for our current example?
Just go back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question. When you change the background of the cell color, can you do white color, that blue color, add 10%?
You can do any color. Blue color is a convenience method.
Right.
You could call UI color and then there's a method.
You can do RGB. You can do. There's a whole bunch of different ways we could set the color. I don't want to get into it today because that's again another wormhole.
Let's get into like one area.
Thomas will do that in his design workshop.
Some cool tricks to convert RGB colors to colors.
Yeah, you could. There's a lot of stuff you could do with mathematically like relating colors together. All right, so let's go back to our to-do and essentially add our to-do array into a table view. And I'm actually not going to make this a bonus. Add the ability to delete a table, cell, and swipe.
But you said a table view, so does that mean we need to create a table view or table?
Table view controller. Sorry, table view controller.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just the added data, or also what was originally contained in the array?
Was originally an array, so the array of your to-do lists, add that in the table view controller. Rob?
The question was passing data from the view controller, which is where we created the array, to the table view.
That's next association. That's right after this.
Is that not what we're trying to do here for this exercise?
No, we just moved to, we make the table view controller the main view, right? The first view.
Okay.
Yeah, here we just populate the table view controller with our array.
But to see it in the app, since we haven't have to do anything up on the primary right now, we have to make it the primary.
Yeah, you have to make it primary. No button yet. If you created the bonus on the last one, don't remove it. Just make the table view controller the starting point, because we'll later on learn how to add from that controller to our table view controller.
So I have two projects. Is there one that you prefer?
The one, so this one is the one we're working on as example. The to-do list exercise is the one you're gonna build on.
Okay.
Feel free to get creative with your cell styles, guys. Jump into the properties for your cells.
Then I have to drag the arrow to the table view controller instead of the controller that I started.
Yeah.
Oh. It's just.
Make sure that
And after you have this, feel free to take a quick break, because next subject is not so easy.
Good thing this so far was a piece of cake.
I know, good thing. Oh, that's awesome.
Can you explain something about when you create the table view controller file? The subclass on UI table class.
Yeah, exactly.
So I created the table view controller. So I wanted to add. Now I create an array table view controller guy.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
I kind of refer back.
But for now, the array should
Oh, yeah, no, you need to like you remember
No, I think it's,
and then you deposit.
I think, yeah, I think you have to use your
Look, I place here, so they like this, and if you look at classes, so but in the show, we're not going to do it. No, the name is exactly like this. I should check for the already because I don't know something
mornings are most of the time.
just the name and then it's our and then you can So I didn't still don't know if that's going to be. I would just that and then when you control.
Oh, wait a second. You would really control. Is that create a you want
Because you need to keep your view controller.
So you can color. Clear color is the default, right?
Yeah.
So we can story.
No.
White collar is not. Right.
Right there, you're changing
I-
your view controller.
It's a good question.
I think for cells it's white collar, not position.
Yeah, I think it is. It is white. Yeah, nothing is clear by default. Yeah, it's white. Yeah.
So did you get that same error,
Which error?
the one that you got when you were demonstrating?
Yeah, you.
Where we had to you cut and paste
Yeah.
text from,
You still get the error. Not expecting that.
no, I did my own things.
And it's precious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just copy and paste, and the important line to copy and paste is this one over here. Because we will get into why this happens.
Display.
Yeah. If you just write this line, see this.
Got it.
Fluffy. Yeah, fluffy names are different. Yeah.
Working now.
Yeah, so
You don't want to undo this. Actually, see. You actually create
So you're not ready.
I mean, I just control that's the point. Story form from the control.
Actually, so inquired to
Or no, command C. So command C is to undo. How are you going to use these sentences to read?
can, but not when it comes to economics independence. Because it's what's an easy but and let's go back to those classes.
could I possibly have that at the same level?
Yeah.
Like,
But not able to control it.
The one in solid.
Yeah. You can control that.
Otherwise, it would be like I'm not gonna get into it. Just very high level. Since I have sections in my table, section has cells, right?
Yeah.
That's what we do. Okay. So can I have one section?
And one section that shows a text history with
Sections also have.
so I have to have it understood.
Yeah. Or if instead of doing one controller, you do the controller, so you drag the table view, it doesn't span the whole height. And then below that you can add a text box, but we're not being printing, so that's. But table controller is the whole size, so you gotta go through the screen.
Alright, so just a controller, like at home, if I wanted to practice a controller with a table view, and then a button and a text field, and then
Yeah, except for there's 2 steps above that.
Yeah, so the first one, don't worry about it, that's why it was crashing, and we fixed it, but it's not properly fixed, we'll get into that one later. And this one is because this guy is unreachable in code, it says. Because you don't have a segue going here, or you don't have an entry point going here, so don't worry about it. Is it? That's not fine. So warning will never, fail.
So, of course, you said now, I haven't seen all the time.
I'm trying to go through the errors now.
Warning's gonna-
I mean, it wasn't, it literally said Bill Feldman. That's why I was like, I mean, I knew that was yellow. Okay. So I think you're supposed to get some.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I wasn't as far off as I thought. But thanks, man.
You must have these provided in your Well, the way you can do that. So for higher, which is thinking out loud. So first I have yeah, sure that so here straight line there's one section. If I change that to would I get an error if I have a set? Okay, or that's just here.
I don't know that, you might.
If I added a second, and I wanted to show it to, then it should show as a section, right? Because each error is a section.
You would have to do a little bit more.
Okay. So if we said, you know,
It's all there. Thomas, how do you expand once you like collapse?
Yeah. I'm gonna do that.
You know, like when you collapse like brackets, then you
Oh, you can help with this. But you have a.
well, she has two.
So there's two
override. But you see, you go.
So also you have two plan definitions. Yeah, watch out when you go like this.
Yes.
It's not gonna work, right? Because you don't have to
Yeah.
Oh, you. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sounds
just having them all
good.
be
Yeah,
controlled.
yes. So.
Another one?
So here I added this return something.
The one that
Number of rows in section.
not within the
So
1 hour.
quick and dirty way to do this if section this is return So, yeah, that's what's going to happen, right? This function gets called every single time. It says number of rows in sections. So for all the sections, you have 2 sections. So this would get called 2 times. And then here you would do same thing. So section is also 0 based. The first section is going to be 0. The second section.
Oh, it's just like
It's like an array. It's like an array. So
So an array of cells nested with an array
Yes.
of sections.
So can I just draw? So how this works is if you have a table view, you have sections. Like let's say you have 2 sections, and in each section you have your cells. Also in your data structure, you have 2 arrays, and in each array you have same thing, right? So this is the same thing. So this is going to be section 0, and if it's 1, 2, 3, and this is going to be section 1 with 1, 2. So this is you would, in a better way, you would have this in one big array. So, no, also this is here you have to do a section that will. No, it's struct. It's a property that is struct that was it. Right, and then now one final thing I think if you run this, this would already work, but you don't have a visual exists yet. See, but now you can this. Yeah.
So we got different levels of
That's what I remember. So came back outside.
Well, yeah, change the word.
I'm sure it was.
Say, so that's good. You this is section.
Yeah, that's our.
Turn 1, turn cell 2, right back in out. And then
I mean, if we actually.
functions cell table views. Cell and then autographs, table cell.
Yeah.
So I all changed to cell 2 array. That was the next.
This is just section better.
Editing style. And then so below that cell, got 2 array, that was all the axis.
My point is that,
Yeah. See, and now you could add a leader to that. That's how concept works. Yeah, it's just you have to view it and then so this is just a create view, and then if you add a label to it.
Because you have to compare this twice, so that was here.
But this is like 40 minutes. Doing it with like, let's say you have like 20 sections, you would have to do this.
rules. But I mean, it's better you think
Just without break, what would you
Yeah, you just spaced everything twice, so make sure you have everything there once. That's all it is.
you would have areas of so you can do this. So this is accuracy, so it's the same thing, right? So yeah, that's taking here to this and then you're not if you yourself, you can but if you go over this, you would be able to do if you have something to say, right? You would store one item and section on a
Yeah. There's actually
first one is section so then you would be able to this is my wall. You would cast this as an array too that equals then my data up zero, right? Then you would have this right over here, this whole thing again, and then you would get that part.
So
And
after
you would be able to do next bad. So who right now stores this?
I don't recall.
So this would be.
You tried left and right and center, it wasn't working?
So what I put, so what I've said it,
So
so
you would
to,
have
there's
this
sex around
right
it.
because it has this big necessary, and then with because this is nested, this is the first one, this is the second one. So the section you can zero, you would get this one, and out of this one you would get the number. If we're number two, you would say that's please and easy. It's not that hard. It looks hard in testing, but if you create it, it's not that hard.
All right, guys, how are we feeling?
Good.
All right, let's get ready to step outside our comfort zone.
Oh,
Bad. It's okay. This is very useful, and this will be a two-part topic that we'll spend across the next class. So let's do a quick review. What are our 3 requirements, or 2 requirements, one optional for table view controllers, or table views? Section, count,
size?
and an element, right? The cell element. Very good.
I don't know what else.
Refer to the cheat sheet. Again, not worry too much about, let me go back here, about all these different parameters yet. We're going to come back to these later. So the important ones right now are just being able to set the count, set our cell text, and set section. Everything else we're going to worry about later. There's things like styles. We can set like we can add like subtext for our rows ourselves. Our mail has subtext, description text between below our subject. You're familiar with the mail app, right? We can set like a right icon, left icon. There's a few things we can do by styles. We can definitely really edit our tables. We have images, icons, etc., etc. But before we do that, it's important to understand how everything is working, how our information is being passed around, and how we're actually expected to add all these things, right? So we actually mentioned this earlier. Someone, Sonia, who said this earlier, this is some protocols, right? So we're getting the required functions because there is a protocol in the background for our table view controller that's requiring us to implement these functions. So going back to protocols, the way that we pass around things in iOS is, well, actually there's a few methods, but one of the more used ways is delegation. And delegation is essentially implementation of a protocol, and it's what we call a design pattern. So design patterns are actually, they're not code values per se. They're not like, you don't have to learn any new syntax. It's not like an array or it's not a dictionary. but they're patterns for code structure. They're ways we structure our code to do certain things. And there's tons of those patterns that we're going to go through. The ones we're going to focus on primarily are delegation, notification system, which is going to be next class, and singletons, which is going to be when we go into saving things to our hard drive, to our database. So design patterns are really common among all languages, and it's really important to understand how things are happening in Swift, because you can actually, a lot of these design patterns, although they're not official in other languages, you can actually use the same concepts in other languages that might have the same properties. So protocols are the ones we're going to focus on today. Protocols are what enable us to allow delegation. So let's do a quick review of protocols. What can we set in protocols? We mentioned methods. What else? Properties, right? And how do we set methods and properties in protocols?
Well, we just declare them, but we don't assign any value to them.
Right. Yeah. So methods are just declare. Properties we give them a get and set, right? So we define whether or not we set a variable or we just read the variable, right? Like Thomas made a good point with arrays when you do the first and last, right? That was just at a getter, not a setter, right?
We don't have to.
You don't have to. Yeah, so that's exactly how table views are working. Essentially, they have protocols in the background, and they have requirements for a number of cells, number of sections, and an optional. Actually, protocols can also be optionals. We don't need to have protocols as requirements. So the method for setting our cell text, that was actually an optional method that table views give us. On a very surface, yes, but you will see how it can be useful with delegation.
So that means certain things in protocol are going to be required in other assumptions.
Yep.
It's just a structure.
It's just a structure.
Expectations, right?
So delegation is the way I implement my protocol, or
Yeah, so delegation is essentially, protocols are the way we implement delegation. We'll go over it in a second. So basically the way delegation works is, does everyone have this? Okay, so this is implementation, how it works. But on a high level, the way it works is, say we have two view controllers, right? And say over here in my first view controller, I have a text label, which is hello world. So in my second view controller, I want to have a text box and a button. Now when I select this button, I get this text box, we go back to this view, and we change this label to this text box, right? Right now this is not possible because each one of these has their own controller, right? And each controller is what? It's a class, right? So class here and a class here.
did you once mention when we started creating files, each class is a file? Did you once mention that if we named basically, or named a class in another file, it'd still be recognizing use it in that other file?
Sort of, but we're not. These are instances, right?
Right.
So we're not. The instances are kind of blind of each other, right? These are black boxes that are totally have no idea each one exists, because whenever we work on one instance, one view, this one gets pushed back in memory and we don't have access to it. Because if these things were always available, we just crash.
I guess what I'm trying to say is when you have the files / the classes, they're globally visible. But what you're saying is even though they're visible, you can't necessarily use them when you're in one of them.
Yeah, so those are our own custom classes. These are our UI controllers. Our UI controllers. Yeah.
Sorry, if you say that when you press the button, what happens?
So when you press the button, this label becomes whatever is in this text box over here. Right?
Isn't that exactly what you assigned us with the list?
It's a what?
On the video today?
This
No,
one.
this one is passing it.
No,
Because
so we
they're
have
two different view controllers.
we have controller here and controller here, right? So this one has label. So let's say text box. Then we have label, or my label. Right. So these are all both in their own classes. Therefore, they're unaware of each other. They're totally blind to each other, right? So we cannot pass this data. So there's a few steps, guys. Please pay attention to this, or you're gonna get lost. So there's a few steps you need to take to make these things aware of each other, right? And protocols are involved. The way this works is we set up a protocol on the second one, and we call this protocol. We call this, for example, set or label, change label, or label info. So far, so good. So we have a protocol here, and this protocol needs to have a method that is used to pass information around. This is very important because the method that goes in there is what we use to pass the information from here to here. So,
So my protocol, when I set it in my sender,
in the second one, the one that's passing data,
which is the sender.
the sender, right? So there's the terminology here is the delegate, which is the controller that gets the information, and there's the delegate object, delegation object, which passes the information. So we have a method
wait,
here,
you implement the protocol in the second view controller.
the one that sends the information.
Yeah.
So we'll call this method like set label text, right? And what's going to happen here is we're going to pass text from here to here, right? We can pass anything. We can pass text, we can pass integers, we can pass arrays, right? Arrays are types, so we pass types, right? String. So in here, our parameter will be a string, right? So we'll say text info, which is a string. So far, so good. And let's give these names. So I'll call this first view controller, first VC. I'll call this second VC. And I'll also add a button on this one, which says change label. So when I select change label, it goes to this view controller. We set the text here, press change, it goes back here, and whatever we set here gets set over here.
Wait, why did I add the change label button then?
So we can go from this controller to this one.
Oh, so I'm gonna build another.
Yeah, so we need to somehow get over here because the whole purpose of this is to exchange information between two screens. Right?
So I want to go back to the second one as soon as I've seen the change in the first view.
This is first, you select this one, it goes to this one, you change it, press
Oh,
change,
okay,
and it goes
got
back to here.
All right, I already got you.
Right? So first step here is when we select change, actually, let's do this. First step is we need to make sure that this first view controller adheres to this protocol, right? So I do first view controller, then I do label info as my protocol. It's not a very good name, but it'll work for now. So
wait, what do you do? So the first view controller, you say.
We say that the first view controller adheres, conforms to the protocol defined in the second view controller.
Oh, okay.
We're setting an expectation here that this one will get information from here.
So that would be at the top of the when I'm in Xcode, I have first VC, I have column, and then I would have UIP controller.
Yeah.
Period, and then
Comma.
Comma, yeah. So
Comma,
UIP controller,
and
exactly.
then label
Comma,
info.
yeah, that's a minor detail, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So first time I add this, it's gonna yell at me. Why is it gonna yell at me?
Because we don't have all the properties / methods
Right.
in
Yeah.
there.
We need a function there called setLabel, right?
Right.
So this one needs a function which is setLabel, and our setLabel has what? Set the text info, right?
No, your function should be called setLabel text.
Thank you. Text.
Yeah, out of curiosity, is my protocol when I define it in my second view controller, is it defined within the class of the second view controller, or is it defined outside? On top as an outside?
Outside.
Outside.
Protocols are always outside our classes
Gotcha.
because our classes conform to protocols, right?
But my second view controller does not conform the same way my first view controller conforms to it.
No. It seems a bit backwards now, but it'll make sense in a second. So there's a few steps that need to happen, but ultimately the process is we go here, we change it. As soon as we change it, we go back here, and what this does is this takes us back here, but it also launches this function from our first view controller, and this text info is the information that we pass from this one. So it kind of like merges these two separate worlds, passing this right here through this function that it accepts, right? This is a bridge between these two separate controllers.
So just by referencing the protocol from the second VC, we would get
We're defining here, but we're referencing here.
So ignore it. So open from the program first we control, so ignore it. Well, this return new value or set label.
So when we run this does not run. When we go to this, when we run the scene, this does not run yet, right? There's nothing called on this yet.
Oh, okay.
This will only get called once we switch from here to here, right? So this transaction here, this transition, is what calls this method.
So does that method also have to be in the second view controller though, since that?
This method is the first view controller, because this method is what runs after we change from our second view controller. Our second view controller calls the method. So change it has an action which does set label.
But the protocol sits over the second view controller class, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So then, doesn't by definition the second view controller class have to inherit that method as well?
So we kind of work with it, and let's demonstrate in a second.
Okay.
High level though, it's important for us to understand the bridging here. So the set label, and what do we pass in set label? Or string?
set label text.
Text box, the text, right? So So now we call this set label, which is essentially the bridge between these two, right? We have this function here, and we know this function is here because this one conforms to that protocol, right? Yeah.
Should the function for the second view control be set label text? Is this all the same function that we're defining, or is this different?
So it's referencing the same one, and I'll demonstrate how it references the same one.
Which you wrote as set label. That's what I'm trying to. Should that be set label text?
Thank you.
Yeah, this is like swipe right or swipe right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's all the same.
So
function.
this name used to be the same as this one. Thank you.
Okay.
What's that say, text?
Set label text.
Text box.
Right. It's all.
Oh, okay.
So
So
we
if I
click
set-
on the button and we call that function set label text, and with that.
And this function, the second one, calls the function, this first one, and it passes the data from here, right?
So the set label text from the second controller calls the set label text from the first one.
Yes. There's one step. There's a couple steps we need down in front of that.
Okay.
But so far, so good.
So the only difference between both are the input parameters respectively, right?
Yeah.
So the input parameter of the first one is text info, which is defined in my protocol, which is string, and then the second one
The second one is calling this one.
is calling that one. Yeah.
And what it's passing is this parameter, which we access from over here, right? Which is text info. So I can say, for example, now my label dot text equals text info.
How's it calling this one?
So we'll get to that in 1 second. Okay. So far, so good? So we know that this one is calling this one over here, right? There's 2 more steps we need.
Can I ask a-
Yeah.
Sorry. Your text info, which is a string, is that your label that says hello world?
Text info is this text box over here. And then my label is hello world. So my label is this one right here.
So why wouldn't that be text box that's called a string instead of, like, why did you change it to say text info?
Because text info is a parameter. Text box is what this is called over here. Right? Text info is our parameter must be called when we define it.
If you step them through the label, so.
If I have a protocol that's protocol animal or can fly, and I have a function of, I don't know, fly, right? And in here I have a parameter for distance, which is a string. When I now define my function in my class, and the function fly, I need to have the name of the parameter be the same as the name of the protocol, which is distance. Make sense? So when I define the function, it needs to have the same naming convention as a protocol function.
First view control is from what we call the second view controller. It's not inheriting or that's why those are two different. Well, you're just defining the
Yeah.
This is very serious.
Yeah, it's okay.
So that's all you do in the second view control. You just say set label text the text box the text, and you don't implement that set label text because it's implemented in the
Exactly. This just
So
calls this one,
okay.
and that's the info here.
Got it.
Right? Okay, so the final 2 steps.
Got it.
So over here, we need to create a variable, and I'll call this delegate. And we'll make this an optional. And this delegate needs to refer to the protocol name. So this delegate needs to refer to label info. So this is a bit strange, right? Because we haven't done this before. We are actually setting the label, the protocol as a type, right? So over here, what we do is we do.
Wait, you say equal label info? Or?
Yeah. So this delegate variable equals this protocol name.
It's like bear dog equals animal, isn't it?
So this will make sense in 1 second. So let me fill out the blanks. So the delegate. Not that. Now,
It shouldn't be column level info, or would you say equal? Say no.
equal. We're setting it to it.
because it's a variable, so it's like an object.
And this will
It's not a class.
just hold the thought for 1 second.
Okay.
So-
because labeling is a
So
variable.
delegate down here, sorry.
Huh?
Delegate, is that tied to set label text?
Yeah, so delegate equals label info. That's the protocol, right? So
Right, yeah, that
this is this right here.
And then your delegate.
Delegate dot set label, right?
It's like you would say self in a class.
Exactly.
As delegate.
Exactly. Now, the key here, which ties those together, is when we go from here to here, programmatically. It's another reason doing things programmatically is useful. Is we can say you know how we go to another view controller, we do let VC equals perform with VC identifier, right? So we do the same thing. We say let second VC equals refers to this one, right? Second VC. What we do here now for this variable, we know where this is pointing, right? When we change, goes back to Monday's lesson. This button points to this one. So over here we do second VC.
Let second VC equals what?
Second VC.
It equals. There's the whole method we did about transferring things programmatically to the next view controller. That's what that code is. I don't remember the one with that.
Okay.
Now we do second VC dot delegate equals self. So what this is saying is this delegate over here is referring to this one.
And can we put that in where in the unit load? Or?
So this is in the first. This is in the change. This is in the button that takes us there. So right before we change, we need to give this second view controller presence of this one. So what it's saying is this delegate property over here, these two must match. The delegate here and the delegate here must match. This delegate property becomes self, which means it's this class, right? So now by doing delegate here, which means this class, dot set label is referring to this self.
And that green thing, let second VC and second VC delegate equal self. That's associated with the action for that button, right? That change label button.
Yeah.
So when we click on that button to go to the second view controller, we also basically create that second view controller.
We're preparing
second
it
VC saying that
that value.
prepare yourself to receive something.
Exactly.
So is it basically in the first VC you're grabbing a pointer to the instance of that object, and then you're just passing it over to the second VC?
Then you're running the method that's in that instance with the data from the second. Let's take a second to breathe this in because it's a lot back and forth. On a high level, does it make sense?
Yeah.
Basically, before we go to the next view controller, we are preparing self. We are giving it the next. We're giving the next view controller an awareness of the previous view controller, so we could run the method in the view controller we're coming from.
So it's a two-way awareness.
Yeah. No, not really. This one
Actually, from top to down.
it's up and down. Yeah, this one's pretty dumb. All it's doing is setting this one, and then it's not aware of anything anymore. This one's aware of this one.
Okay. So you're giving second view controller, whereas the previous view controller in order to set the method.
Exactly. To run the method. Running the method is key. That's how we pass the data. Is run the method.
Okay, so I followed you until declaring the delegate in the second view controller and delegate dot set label text. And then when you go on to the first view controller, let second view controller is more or less, since second view controller is a class on its own, I'm instantiating
So
an instance of that class in my first view controller, right?
So if I go into my cheat sheet and I look at my ability to change, so right here, let VC equals self storyboard, just the view controller.
Correct.
Second VC is view controller. That's what this second VC is. It's finding where the other view controller is, and then it's setting its delegate.
It's an object of that class, right?
Exactly, it's pointing to that for now.
Exactly. And then what it's setting itself, can you just elaborate on that?
So what it's doing is it's looking for that one.
Yeah.
And as soon as it finds it, and we're transferring, going to the second one, it's setting its delegate. So over here we do second VC.delegate
Yeah.
itself. So this one now, the delegate is aware of this class. Self here is this whole class.
Okay, because the delegate is the sender, so it's saying, I'm the second VC, I'm the sender.
Yeah.
All right, and it's doing that within the first view controller, which goes back to the points that you just exchanged. The first view controller is only aware of the point where you set the second view controller as its delegate, and that's it.
Yeah, the first view controller is finding the target, sending
Exactly.
its awareness itself to the target, and then going in the background.
So it's prepping itself to receive only, and that's it.
It's not preparing itself to receive anything.
Okay.
It's just in the background.
It's just in the background, exactly. Okay. And
Okay, can we do that?
Let's do it.
Very slowly. So when we get errors in our program crashes, we don't get.
You know, this is not an easy concept to grasp, guys. So on a high level, it's important. Remember, follow this cheat sheet. It's also in your resources. These are step-by-step directions. So I'm going to follow these right now, step by step. So I'm going to go back to my GA campuses.
Which one?
Yeah, they're kind of named the same.
So I'm going back to my table view demo. So
Teddy, I don't mean to copy or overwork you, but can we start with a brand new project just because this was so intense? If we do it step by step to follow, if it's not too much work to repeat it.
that's fine. I think it would be more value to do it here because I want us to add something to the array. Right? This will be the next exercise to add something. So the purpose of this is we click on the Add New button, and it takes us to a new screen where we can add a GA campus to our table, to our array. Right?
Can you see that?
So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a link to another view controller. And the view controller is going to have a text box and a button that adds a campus to our view of campuses.
Oh, so it's what I asked you just before the break.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Right? So let's get cracking.
We only have 27 minutes, so.
37 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to, instead of worrying about the first one, I'm going to create a brand new view controller. So let's drag a view controller right next to our table view.
Just a regular view.
Yes. And let's also add a controller to tie this to. So I'm going to click on New File. And for this one, make sure that the subclass is back to UI view controller, not UI table view controller. And I'll call this add view controller because we're adding something to it.
So it's UI view control, right?
Yep, yep. It's very important. Make sure when you, it's going to remember your last settings is a do UI table view controller. Make sure it's a subclass the UI view controller.
Still have the original view controller?
Yeah, let's leave it there for now. I don't want to mess with it.
All right.
I don't want to complicate things anymore.
We also do the identifier as well.
We're gonna, yep, let's do it as well. So let's do two things. Let's tie up our new view controller to the class that we added. So this should be the add view controller. And we'll actually do the identifier in a second. I don't want us to jump ahead. So for this one, we're selecting the add view controller for this class. And for our table view, let's also embed this in a navigation controller. So editor, embed in navigation controller. because the table view controller spans the table view across the whole page, so you don't have room to edit button there. That's why we embedded this in the navigation controller, right? Questions so far?
25 minutes. No pressure.
We'll get through it.
Subclass of UI view control, not table view. Yeah. How come it doesn't recognize that automatically?
Because it remembers the last one.
Oh, okay.
So you can't add any buttons to table view?
To the table.
Not to a table view controller. Technically, you kind of can't even overlay stuff. You can have table view, which doesn't take up the whole page, but I'm not gonna worry about it yet. So what Alexi asked in the beginning. Now to our navigation controller and our table view controller, let's add a bar button. And I'm gonna call this add. Add campus.
Okay, so the start arrow points to the navigation controller now.
Because the cards, right? So navigation now owns.
Did you also add a Swift file for the navigation controller? Or?
No, that doesn't need a so far. So far we have our table view controller that has a controller file called table view controller Swift. We have our view controller that's put into the file called add view controller to Swift. Right? Now, let's do what we're familiar with at first before we jump to protocols. So let's make it so this add campus button brings this up modally. So let's bring up our code editor side by side with our interface builder. So this should bring up the table view controller side by side, right? And right below my GA campuses, I'm going to drag and drop the add campus as an action. And I'll call this add campus. So it should have something like this.
And again, my sender is any object because I'm not necessarily changing any properties.
Yeah, don't worry about it for now. Yeah, exactly.
Why did mine come up as bar button item?
What?
Mine came up as bar button item instead of any object.
Did you set it as an action or as an outlet? Should be an action.
Yes.
Oh, that'll explain it.
What's the easiest way to get the controller to show any view controller show off? If I try to do dual views,
It doesn't automatically pick it up. Make sure you click on the tab bar or on the top over here. This should automatically do it.
Right there.
Okay, and then now let's link up to this one modally, all right? So remember that method. So we do self.present view. There's no autocomplete controller. Oh, this will be fun. Actually, let's take a step back. I want to highlight this out. We first have to find the view controller, right? So I'll say var add view controller, add VC, equals self dot storyboard dot instantiate. Come on, please. view controller with identifier. Anyone have autocomplete? Is that right?
I have it.
Okay.
What about the question mark?
Let's also do a question mark as a storyboard. Now, what goes over here in my identifier? The ID of the scene, right?
Yeah.
So we need to go in our scene over here and give this an identifier. Remember this from last class?
Yeah.
So you give it a storyboard ID. And again, I'll call this add BC, so it's simple. So this lets us reference it from here. And there's one more thing we need to do in this line, which was
As view control, whatever.
add view controller. Very good. We're getting for the add one, right? Because that's what the one we're looking for. So this one right here is what we're looking for. So for the present view controller, Yep.
Just on a logical level, the add VC is the ID, and then when I say as, I'm playing the class.
yeah, because we got a reference on the storyboard
Yeah.
and the class.
Okay.
So we do add VC, animated, true, and completion nil for now. So this takes us to the next view programmatically.
Why didn't you tie that up through the navigation control and just do the form segue?
We could have, but there's one more step that we have to do because we've got to actually reference that with a segue. We only reference the segue. We had to also, we would have also had to do this to reference the actual view controller itself. So that's a good question.
I'm getting an error add. I'm getting a variable used within its own identifier error. Initial value. Variable used within its own initial value.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Say yes.
I just think you have an extra print.
I think so. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's all I have. Yeah. So I'm gonna run this really quick. We don't have much time, guys. Let's move along. So let's make sure that my add campus button goes to my next view.
Like that.
It does.
And then it does nothing. Okay, good.
Cool. Does nothing so far.
Yes.
So next step is let's go in my add campus and do three things. Let's add our text box. Let's add our button. And then for the button, we'll add the action to go back. So
we need to add a protocol, right?
So first of all, let's do a text field. And a button,
Kind of button, just regular button.
just a regular button. I'll say add and go back. And let's also tie our button to our class and add an action for it. So right at the top here, I'm going to drag and drop it. And I'll say save and go back.
Sorry, which one? That was to the button. That was to the button.
Yep, button to class action. And then to dismiss it, we just do self dot dismiss view controller. Come on, complete animated. Please correct me because I'm not getting. Okay. True, completion nil.
Or you made this an action, so you can go back, right?
Yep. Let's also drag our text box here so we have awareness of it. So IB outlet from text box to the top, and I'll say add text box.
Teddy, link above adding the back to the button. I missed as it's the text box.
It's text box. Yeah.
Because right now, we're just dismissing, we don't.
We're just dismissing, exactly.
Does it make any difference if I, like, for some reason, auto completion is giving me a true all in capitals?
Yeah.
Do I say?
Stay.
That is it.
What is that?
We have 10 minutes.
Okay.
You have 13, you're good.
13 minutes.
I'm prepared to stay.
Yeah, unfortunately, not everybody can. Okay, everybody have this?
Yep.
Okay, first step was we have to enter protocol. Where do we enter protocol?
Above the class.
Above the one that sends information back, right? So this one, right?
Above the class.
So say protocol, add campus. Actually, protocols are much more like nouns than they are actions. So we'll just call this campus. After the function, right? Very good. So we'll call the function as, we'll set it. So remember, the function is what gets called in the other controller, right? The other controller. So the action is, what does the other controller do? It adds a campus, right? So we'll say add campus. And
We
then
haven't used add campus as a function elsewhere. We've used add campus about 100 times. We haven't used it somewhere else.
we haven't used add campus anywhere yet. We've done add VC, which is the add
Okay.
view controller. Add campus is not defined anywhere.
Okay.
And we'll do the campus name as a string. So that's this first step up here. All right, everybody have the protocol? So what's the second step? What's conforming to a protocol? The other view controller, right? So let's go to our table view controller. I'll make this a bit larger here. So we add the protocol right here because the class, we can keep adding protocols and superclasses, right? So we'll call this campus, right? That's what protocol is. And it will yell at us, right? Why is it yell? What will it yell at us? Exactly. My Xcode is super slow, so it's not yelling at me yet. The function name was campus name string. Yeah. Okay. So I'll go back here. So I need to add the function we defined.
Label.text.
Yeah, so we can actually do that now. Actually, not label a text, because what we're doing is we're adding it to our array.
Oh, okay, yeah, so we have to go campus slash,
GA campus.
GA campus.
Yeah, very good. But let's not do that yet. Let's make sure we have all the functionality, right? So we set our protocol. Our first view controller is conformed to our protocol. We have the function that we need, that thing will be running, right? So the next step is
Go back.
we need to, first of all, declare the delegate over here. This is going to be referring to this, right? So let's go in our table view controller. A lot of it.
I was just gonna say, like, why are we going back and forth? You've got this diagram that shows you everything that you need to do with each of the views. Why bounce back and forth?
Because I'm going in order.
Because it's going in order.
I'm going in order. Otherwise, it'll be illogical to just print everything in one sprint.
Because this looks like a map to me.
Yeah. Okay.
So we go back to
Doing
the,
all the black text first, I think it's gonna go through.
yes,
Okay.
so we go back to the add view controller.
So now the add view controller. This is where we define our delegate. So here we'll say var delegate is campus. We'll make this an optional, right? Because it won't always be there, because if we get to this screen somewhere else, we won't have a delegate, right? That's why it's been optional. Because not every time we go here, we'll be passing something from another view controller, right? So delegate over here needs to always be an optional. So var delegate, in my opinion, this is probably the most confusing part, is because we're referring to a protocol, right? We haven't done this before. Just remember that the delegate on the second view controller refers to the protocol.
Then how do you use protocols just as protocol? Like when I use them, they're always delegates. I mean, I end up using them as delegates. So
It depends. I mean, most apps, yeah. When I worked on a big news app,
Yeah.
and it was really heavy in architecture, I use them a lot.
Yeah.
But in most apps, you're right, I usually don't use them as simple delegates. Okay, so we have our delegate over here. So the step is, after we select this text box over here, we're gonna run the function in the other method, right? So that's right here. Save and go back. So we'll do self.delegate dot, what do we call here? Add campus, right? This is this step right here. When we do delegate set label over here, we're doing delegate set add campus, which is the method we added on this one. We're now referencing the function in the first view controller. So add campus, and now we pass the string, which is
The text box, add text box, dot text.
add text box dot text. So we're done here with this one.
So it might make more sense to, if you don't like switching, I most of the time write the protocol, I set my delegate, and then I call my delegate, and then I'm like, okay, so now everything is done here, I need to go back to my previous file, and I need to implement the delegate I just called, because if you do it that way, your previous file doesn't know anything about this end campus function yet. It's just a matter of preference.
Yep. Do you want to get yelled at or not? If you don't mind getting yelled at because you know what's going on, that's okay. Okay, so are we clear on this file? What's going on? We have this delegate, which is conforming to this protocol. It's referring to this protocol. And as soon as we go select add text box, we are doing delegate, which is referring to really this one, right? For a first view controller. And we're running the method in the first view controller with a parameter from here.
And the self.delegate.addCampus that I do inside the function of my button, just because I'm not really needing it, or I don't need it before I click on the button.
Exactly. It's action based. So now over here, I can actually access whatever I sent back. So how do I add the campus I sent back to my GA campuses?
You append it to the array.
So self, yep, dot GA campuses, dot append, campus name. Pretty easy, right?
Oh, this game.
I will make an exercise again like I did with functions, like a big one that really lights out and guides you through doing this.
Yeah.
I will do it again because I realize this is big enough again.
Yeah.
It's just a line.
It's a mind, yeah. This is your map. Refer to your map.
Also, this is going to be like no brainer in 2 weeks, so it's so easy when you look back at it.
You're basically setting, it's like the master and the slave, right? The master is the thing that's sending the thing. The slave is the pointer, and you're just sending things from the master to the slave. So now if I do add campus, son of a gun. Let's see. I'm getting error as well. Give me 1 second here to see what's going on. So the view controller. Oh, you know what we didn't do? We didn't set the delegates.
Yeah, the delegate, yes.
Yeah, so we do, so the last step was we need to, from this stage, we have to set this delegate over here. We never did that, right? Exactly. So we do add VC,
It's in the table view controller, right?
yep, dot delegate.
Oh, wait, where are we in the table?
Yeah, in the table view controller, we never set the delegate for the other controller from here.
Yes, equals that.
Yeah, that's the primary reason we need to identify the VC here, is so we can set its delegate itself. So all this is doing is saying, hey, the delegate we defined in the add view controller, we are setting it to our current state, so we can reference our current state, our current
And
class.
we're
Why
doing
is
that
it not-
from that change label, but from that first button. So as we do that button that says go to that next one, we say, oh, by the way, I want to be the delegate.
Exactly.
To that
Also,
VC.
your app doesn't crash because of this, because if you wouldn't have this line, it just wouldn't work. But I think it crashes because, or maybe, but you have to load your data too on the campus, right? Because your data array gets out of sync with your table view. So in add campus here, you have to do self table view data.
We shouldn't have to. I mean, we could try it,
I
but
just ran that and crashed.
Yeah, it's still crashes.
add campus.
What does it say? You're making attribute.
View and invalid argument exception.
Not exception.
That-
User who I
So that
bought
I wonder if my naming is just wrong for the controller. For the scene. Add VC.
You didn't have the, yeah, you didn't take the, say, like,
Give me 1 minute, guys. Let me figure out what's going on here.
Self-represent view controller.
The what?
Self-represent view controller. Say add VC.
Yep.
Is that supposed to say the actual name of the view controller? Add view controller.
No, add VC is what it's referencing. So that's right. That was working before. Fire as add view controller.
Well, we As we see the delegate equals self.
Because the delegate in the second view controller must reference the class that it's coming from.
But we do that from the table.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So let me do a bit of debugging here. So the problem is not with our delegate because
It doesn't get presented.
let's all debug this, guys.
Yeah, mine's working.
Yours is more.
If I did, I'm like, it's on my throat.
Just trying to line up. Right.
Yeah.
Restart Xcode.
Yeah, I'm gonna restart because my autocompletion has been slow anyway.
Yeah, because I could just want to follow everything. I think you have an extra self somewhere there. Was it again?
Let's see.
If you go to the view control.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It does? That's bizarre.
I think I got everything.
So,
I just erased it.
Eddie, can you go to add like
This is self G.
Yeah, there you go. That line which is highlighted, that self before the delegate, isn't that wrong?
No, that's right.
He doesn't have
That's
that.
right. Because it's the class that's missing it. It's a class method.
No, not the dismiss view controller, the one above it. The line above that, yeah, that one.
That's fine. It's referring to this delegate. Really, it shouldn't make a difference. It shouldn't, because actually the problem is happening when we're going to the second one, not when we're going back to the first one.
This is strange. You have yes.
Let me see. Let's open our debugger.
I recognize selling cursor.
The problem is probably in our table view controller when it's sending. What's up?
When the add character button, it's supposed to
I mean, you probably
make
can
itself in that function, right?
It's supposed to what?
When you put add VC, and it says self storyboard initiate view controller with the identifier add VC.
Yeah.
It's the delegate. It's creating itself as the delegate, right?
No, it's creating the. Oh yeah, so it's saying yeah, itself is a delegate. Yeah, exactly.
And so with the ID that we passing it, the add VC is of the second view controller, not the table.
Yeah, so it's saying that the delegate over there is referring to this one. So that delegate is myself, which is the first one. is the first class. So that's a reference to this delegate.
It's a reference to tech control.
Yeah.
And that's the, in the quotes, advocacy.
Exactly. So advc is the ad view controller, and the delegate over there is referencing the table view controller.
Does it matter that you have two different functions that say add campus?
Yeah, I'm
Mine says add campus and then add campus bot.
I think
Oh,
I'm wondering
shit.
the same thing.
Yeah. Add campus to array. That might be it. Wow. Let's try this. That would be really silly if that's it.
We got it there. Does not conform to protocol.
Because we gotta change it in the protocol as well. That's what it was. Good call. So the problem was that, going back to naming conventions, the method that we grabbed from the navigation controller and the method we were running after we came back to it, they were named the same. So the IB action was called addCampus, and the function was called addCampus.
I just changed it here too because it's on that.
Yeah. So I changed the first one, not the action, to addCampus to array. And make sure they change that in the other view controller. So the protocol is addCampus to array, and the delegate points to addCampus to array.
So wait a minute, you change it in the protocol and you call it to array, and then you change it in the table view controller, right?
Yep. And I also changed it here to save and go back. So delegate dot addCampus to array.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry guys, that was my bad for naming confusion. So I want to say Texas, and there's Texas.
I got lost.
And in the table view or in the attribute controller, how we're changing it.
Yeah, how many places did we need to change?
We're just-
So we changed the function on the protocol to addCampus to array. When we do the delegate to addCampus over there,
AddCampus to array.
and then in the table view, we change the function itself to addCampus to array. So 3 places.
Where is the original add campus?
So we had named the IB action to addCampus. So that was conflicting with this one. Hey guys, sorry we ran a bit late because of this stupid error. Things is good. Let's do a quick review. So where does the protocol get added?
Up by the class.
Which class?
The
class is gonna
send
the one sending the information, right? Which one is the delegating object versus delegate?
Delegating object is the
Wait,
second one.
here's
That second one again, sending to the delegate. Okay. All right. So for homework, we're gonna post a fun exercise, but please do the same thing to your to-do list app. Work with delegates, add task to your to-do list task, and then we'll post the fun homework at the game over the next day.
Is that due on Sunday?
Due on Monday.
Monday?
Not Sunday, because that's Sunday Super Bowl.
Is the fun game the
What is the
Guys, exit surveys before we go. Don't forget. Here, link.
So yours is working? Yeah.
Jesus.
set the protocol, right?
Well, see, like now you put it was to go like this, but like how tomorrow.
Yeah, I
Set up a call. And then now over here.
But as far as you know, you have the right codes in there.
What do you say, delegate?
Yeah, so protocol, this where this.
Protocol function, delegate, and delegate. And then,
Okay, so the add temperature array, so I made the change here. The table view. Then it needs to
That's what you're saying.
here.
Yeah, well, that's what you're saying. It's just that it's
Now, here.
this way. It's cobalt. Yeah. No, it will yellow.
Establishing where, that's the first step, is establishing where.
It's stupid, but it's already thinking.
Oh, beautiful. That's. Oh, that was so big.
Well,
No, it was very, the part of claims, I got an error that's in campus and then at campus. Once you set campus, product claim, the error had. Pointed out a people, just pointed out. And like, yeah, shapes like that versus and then like which is what like you can't have a useful app if you're not able to do on trafficking. It's very much like you can be able to save all your
Yeah, I know. Yum Rubus. Yeah, Bunny's interesting. All right. Guys, delegation is really difficult at first, but it really becomes second nature. Like, we'll keep practicing this over and over and over again. When are we going to coordinate us?
That's what I was
Coordinate us? Probably. So, end of February? Yeah, around then. Because until then, we're not able to save anything. Until then, we're not able to save anything. Yeah, right.
Okay, so I need to put the red one into there. In here. This is
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So forward is to make our two legs basically
That's exactly what I want.
Yeah.
Because text box, you can say whatever is in there here.
work out all the variables. I was thinking about that, and I was like, oh my god, it's a simple game.
I just say solitaire. You want solitaire?
Go fish.
So finish the to-do list app, add delegates in there so you can add a to-do list on there. And I'm gonna post the to-do list, the ad screen, make sure the ad screen adds a to-do list.
Oh, okay,
Exactly. And I also post another exercise.